Well, good morning. Today in our devotional study of the Psalms, we come to Psalm 25. And I think it's definitely true that we've been looking at these Psalms devotionally, and that we're saying, how can they minister to us? How can we connect with them and be cared for by the Word of God here in the book of Psalms? And so we have not attempted to approach them particularly academically or in a scholarly way, but there are a couple things that are of note about Psalm 25 that I think perhaps warrant our calling attention to them. The first one is, and of course we're reading it in English, not in Hebrew, David, the psalmist, begins each verse with a different letter of the Hebrew alphabet. So it's an acrostic. Aleph, Beth, Gimel, Daleth, Hey. I remember that when I was learning Hebrew. Those are the first five letters of the Hebrew alphabet. So that each of these first phrases begin with Aleph, Beth, Gimel, Daleth, Hey, and so he works his way through, working the words so that they begin with a different letter of the Hebrew alphabet. We would never know that in English. It's just interesting that he took the time to do that. A little more obvious to us, because that one we wouldn't see at all, is that the psalmist is actually writing what's called a chiasm. Now, a chiasm, the word chiasm comes from the Greek letter chi, which is the one that looks like an X, and so it's actually referring to an X-like structure of the psalm. Now, the reason I say it's noticeable is if you read this through, what you begin to notice is a repetitiveness of it. So what actually is happening is David's saying truth 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So he's saying these truths and then he's repeating them in reverse order. That's a chiasm. And there's a couple places where it's a little bit obvious. First couple verses, in you, Lord, my God, I put my trust. I trust in you. Do not let me be put to shame, nor let my enemies triumph over me. And then at the end, guard my life, this is verse 20, and rescue me. Do not let me be put to shame, for I take refuge in you. May integrity and uprightness protect me, because my hope, Lord, is in you. You see that? He's closing with the exact way he opened. Another obvious place, let me see if I can find it here. I'm going to read from verse 7 on. Do not remember the sins of my youth and my rebellious ways. According to your love, remember me, for you, Lord, are good. Good and upright is the Lord, therefore he instructs sinners in his ways. He guides the humble in what is right and teaches them his way. Then he goes on, but verse 12, who then are those who fear the Lord? He will instruct them in the ways they should choose. And so here we're getting to that like point 7, that's then repeated in the latter verses. So it's like point, A, B, C, D, E, F, F, D, E, B, C, A. Now, I say that just because as you notice the repetitiveness of it, that's what David's doing. So it's that structure. So having said a couple of academic things about it, let me point to some more pastoral and applicational kind of teachings from this psalm. So what we see here, the thing that grabbed me when I read it was this section on remembering. So in verse 6 and following, it says this, remember, Lord, your great mercy and love, for they are from old. Do not remember the sins of my youth and my rebellious ways. According to your love, remember me, for you, Lord, are good. That's actually a little mini chiasm in itself, isn't it? He says something, says another point, and then comes back to the first point. So what he's saying here is, again, remember me, Lord. Remember, Lord, your great mercy and love, for they are from old. So we can say to God, remember the way you are. Remember this about yourself, God. You are merciful. Therefore, don't remember my sins. Do not remember the sins of my youth and my rebellious ways. Then, according to your love, remember me, for you, Lord, are good. In other words, remember me ensconced in your love. When you remember me, don't remember my wayward ways as a youth. Up until the time I was 22, I didn't walk with God, and I was living for myself and lived a very wayward lifestyle, and nothing like God would have wanted me to live. I was living completely for myself. And so I could say to God, don't remember my rebellious ways. But I do want you to remember one thing. Remember your great mercy and love. Remember your mercy and love when you think of this person. The word that is love there is the Hebrew word chesed. And if you are learning Hebrew, it's not Hesed. It's Chesed. It's like CH, but that's the way the Hebrew is pronounced. Chesed. And the word Chesed means covenant faithfulness, covenant love. So it's this kind of unique love that's used all through the Old Testament of God's love toward his covenant people. As a matter of fact, he says, all the ways of the Lord are loving and faithful toward those who keep the demands of his covenant. So we who are his people, we keep the demands of his covenant, and what he keeps is his chesed, his covenant love for us. So as you think about this today, I know this was a little bit more academic, but I want you to remember that you can always say to God, remember who you are. Remember that you're a God of mercy. So don't remember my mistakes from my past. As far as the east is from the west, so far has he removed my transgressions from me. So that is a great word for us today, to know that God remembers his character, but he forgets our youthful transgressions and our past of sin. Isn't that a wonderful way to start the day today?